r/ProRevenge foster FIL said my daughter faked cancer, so I destroyed him. The words hit me like a physical blow across the face. She's faking it for attention, and you're all falling for it. The entire family gathering went silent. 23 people crammed into my mother-in-law's living room for what was supposed to be a celebration of Emma's latest clear scan results, and my foster father-in-law had just accused my 6-year-old daughter of faking leukemia. Emma was curled up on the couch next to me, her tiny bald head resting against my shoulder, exhausted from her treatment earlier that week. She'd been so excited to tell everyone that her white blood cell count was improving. Now she looked up at me with those big, confused eyes that had seen too much for a kindergartner. What does faking mean, Mommy? I felt my husband David tense beside me. His foster father, Robert, stood in the center of the room with his arms crossed, that smug expression I'd learned to hate over the past 3 years plastered across his weathered face. Robert, that's enough, my mother-in-law whispered, but he wasn't done. Look at her, he continued, gesturing toward Emma like she was evidence in a court case. Perfectly fine when she wants to be. But suddenly sick when the cameras come out, when people start paying attention. Classic manipulation behavior. I've seen it 100 times in my foster kids. The room erupted. David's sister started yelling. His brother stood up so fast he knocked over his beer. But I couldn't move. I was trapped in this moment, watching this man, this person who was supposed to be family, tear apart my baby girl in front of everyone she loved. And those medical bills? Robert's voice cut through the chaos. Convenient how they keep climbing, isn't it? Almost like someone's patting them. Making a nice profit off everyone's sympathy. That's when I snapped. I carefully moved Emma to sit with her Aunt Sarah and stood up. The room went quiet again, something in my posture making everyone freeze. Robert had that satisfied look on his face, like he'd finally said what everyone was thinking. He had no idea what he'd just unleashed. Emma, sweetheart, I said, my voice deadly calm, why don't you go show Cousin Jake your new coloring book upstairs? As soon as she was out of earshot, I turned back to Robert. You want to see fake? You want to talk about scams? Because I've got some very interesting things to discuss about your business practices, your foster care license, and those insurance claims you filed last year. The color drained from his face. David grabbed my arm, but I shook him off. Don't, I warned, my eyes never leaving Robert's. Don't you dare defend him after what he just said about our daughter. For 3 years, I'd bitten my tongue. I'd smiled through his passive-aggressive comments about David marrying beneath him. I'd ignored his snide remarks about my job as a social worker. I'd even stayed quiet when he questioned whether Emma was really David's biological daughter. But attacking my sick child? That was war. Robert tried to backtrack. Now listen here, I was just saying. You were just saying my 6-year-old is a manipulative liar and I'm running a medical scam. In front of her. In front of everyone. I pulled out my phone. Funny thing about being a social worker, you learn to document everything. And you make a lot of friends in government agencies. His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. You have no idea what you just started. The ride home was silent except for Emma's soft sniffling in the back seat. David gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles were white, and I stared out the passenger window, my mind already 3 steps ahead, cataloging everything I knew about Robert's operation. Mom? Emma's small voice broke through my planning. Did I do something wrong? My heart shattered all over again. No, baby. You didn't do anything wrong. Grandpa Robert said some very mean things that weren't true. But why would he say them if they weren't true? David's jaw clenched, and I saw him glance at me in the rearview mirror's reflection. This was the question I'd been dreading. How do you explain to a 6-year-old that sometimes adults are cruel for no reason? Sometimes people say hurtful things when they're confused or scared, I said carefully. But that doesn't make it okay. When we got home, I tucked Emma into bed with extra stories and cuddles, then found David pacing in our kitchen. He looked up when I walked in, his face torn between anger and something that looked like fear. Sarah, please tell me you weren't serious back there. I pulled out my laptop and set it on the kitchen table. Dead serious. He's the only father figure I've ever had. His voice cracked slightly. I know he's difficult, but... Difficult? I turned to face him fully. David, he just humiliated our daughter in front of the entire family. He called her a liar and accused us of fraud. That's not difficult, that's unforgivable. But going after his business? His foster license? That's his livelihood. That's how he and Mom survive. There it was. The loyalty Robert had been banking on for years. David's desperate need to protect the man who'd taken him in when he was 14, who'd given him a home when the system had failed him repeatedly. What about Emma's livelihood? I shot back. What about her emotional well-being? She's going to remember this forever, David. She's going to remember that her grandfather called her a liar when she's fighting for her life, and she's going to remember whether or not we stood up for her. David slumped into a chair, running his hands through his hair. There has to be another way. Can't we just limit contact? Keep Emma away from him until he apologizes? I opened my laptop and pulled up the folder I'd been building for over a year. Screenshots of Robert's social media posts about his business trips that coincided suspiciously with foster care inspections. Photos from his Facebook showing expensive purchases right after receiving monthly stipend payments. Email chains I'd accidentally been copied on discussing ways to maximize the system. Look at this, I said, turning the screen toward David. This is from 6 months ago. He's bragging about his new boat to his buddy Mike. That boat cost more than our annual household income. Where do you think that money came from? David's face went pale as he scrolled through the evidence. How long have you been collecting this? Since the second family dinner I attended. When he made that comment about foster kids being easy money if you know how to work the system. I sat down across from him. I'm a mandated reporter, David. I should have acted on this months ago. But you didn't because of me. I didn't because I was trying to protect your relationship with him. But he crossed a line tonight that I can't uncross. I reached across the table and took his hand. I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing this because what he said to Emma was evil, and what he's doing to vulnerable kids is worse. David was quiet for a long moment, staring at the screen. Finally, he looked up at me with exhausted eyes. If you do this, he'll never forgive either of us. Good, I said. I don't want his forgiveness. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. Word had spread fast through David's family, and the battle lines were already being drawn. Asterisk, how could you threaten Robert like that? Asterisk, from David's Aunt Linda. He was out of line, but destroying his life isn't the answer, his cousin Mark. Asterisk, that man has never liked you and finally showed his true colors. Burn him down. Asterisk, surprisingly, from David's usually passive Uncle Tom. But the message that made my blood run cold was from Robert himself, sent at 3:47 a.m. Asterisk, you have 24 hours to apologize publicly to me and the family, or I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of mother you really are. I have connections too. Asterisk. David was already gone when I came downstairs. He'd left a note saying he needed time to think and would be staying at his brother's for a few days. My heart sank. Robert's manipulation was already working, driving a wedge between us just like he'd planned. Emma shuffled into the kitchen in her princess pajamas, dragging her stuffed elephant. Where's Daddy? He had to help Uncle Mike with something, I lied, hating myself for it. Are you feeling okay this morning? Any tummy troubles? She shook her head, but I could see the exhaustion in her eyes. The stress from last night was taking its toll on top of everything else her little body was already fighting. My phone rang, Dr. Peterson, Emma's oncologist. Mrs. Harrison? I had a rather strange call this morning. Someone claiming to be Emma's grandfather called our billing department asking detailed questions about her treatment costs and insurance coverage. He seemed to be implying there were irregularities. My hand started shaking. What kind of questions? He wanted to know if we'd noticed any unusual patterns in her case, whether her symptoms seemed consistent, if we'd ever had concerns about, and I quote, manufactured illness syndrome. Dr. Peterson's voice was carefully professional, but I could hear the underlying outrage. I want you to know that we immediately ended the call and flagged his contact information. But Mrs. Harrison, this is concerning behavior. After I hung up, I sat staring at my phone in disbelief. Robert wasn't just doubling down, he was actively trying to plant seeds of doubt about Emma's diagnosis with her medical team. This wasn't just cruel anymore, it was dangerous. If he managed to get Child Protective Services involved, if he convinced anyone in authority that we were somehow fabricating Emma's illness. The doorbell rang, startling me out of my spiral. Through the peephole, I saw a woman in a navy blue suit with a clipboard. Mrs. Harrison? I'm Janet Mills from Child Protective Services. We received a call regarding concerns about your daughter's welfare. May I come in? My worst nightmare was unfolding in real time. Emma looked up from her cereal, eyes wide with the kind of fear that no 6-year-old should have to feel. Mommy, who is it? Just someone who needs to talk to Mommy for a few minutes, baby. Why don't you go watch cartoons? I kept my voice steady, but inside I was screaming. As I let the caseworker in, my phone buzzed with another text from Robert. Asterisk, told you I had connections. This is just the beginning. Apologize, or it gets worse. Asterisk. That's when I realized this wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about survival. Robert had declared all-out war, and he was willing to use the system, my system, against me to destroy my family. Fine. If he wanted to play dirty, I'd show him what dirty really looked like. But first, I had to survive this CPS visit with my daughter still in my custody. The CPS caseworker settled onto my couch with practiced efficiency, her eyes scanning the room with the kind of trained observation I recognized from my own work. Emma had reluctantly gone to the living room, but I could see her peeking around the corner, clutching her elephant tighter. Mrs. Harrison, I want to be upfront with you, Janet Mills said, opening her folder. The caller made some very serious allegations. Claims that your daughter's medical condition might be exaggerated for financial gain. My stomach dropped, but I forced myself to stay calm. And what's your protocol for investigating those kinds of allegations? She gave me a sharp look. You're familiar with our procedures? I'm a social worker myself. I know how this works. I pulled out my phone and started recording. I also know my rights. What specific evidence prompted this visit? Janet's demeanor shifted slightly. She was dealing with someone who understood the system, not a panicked parent who could be easily intimidated. The caller provided what he claimed were inconsistencies in your daughter's medical timeline. Said she appeared healthy at family gatherings but suddenly became symptomatic when medical professionals were present. The caller being my foster father-in-law, Robert Morrison? I can't confirm. The same Robert Morrison who runs Morrison Family Foster Care? Who's currently being investigated by state licensing for financial irregularities? I watched her face change as the pieces clicked. Did he mention that part when he called? Janet's pen stopped moving. Mr. Morrison is a licensed foster care provider? For 15 years. And he just spent yesterday evening telling my daughter, his foster granddaughter with acute lymphoblastic leukemia, that she was faking her illness. I pulled up Emma's medical portal on my phone. Would you like to see her treatment records? Her lab results? The photos from her bone marrow biopsies? Before Janet could respond, my phone rang. Dr. Peterson again. Mrs. Harrison, I'm so sorry to bother you, but we've had another call. This time someone claiming to be conducting a welfare investigation asked our nursing staff about your behavior during Emma's appointments. They wanted to know if you seemed overly eager for procedures, if you pushed for unnecessary treatments. I put the call on speaker, watching Janet's expression grow increasingly troubled. Dr. Peterson, this is Janet Mills from Child Protective Services. I'm currently investigating allegations against Mrs. Harrison. Can you clarify what you just said? Absolutely. Someone is systematically calling our departments trying to build a case that Mrs. Harrison has been fabricating or exaggerating her daughter's illness. It's completely baseless. Emma's diagnosis is unquestionable, and her mother has been nothing but appropriate throughout her treatment. In fact, she's been more cautious than most parents, always seeking second opinions, making sure Emma wasn't being overtreated. After Dr. Peterson hung up, Janet closed her folder and looked at me directly. Mrs. Harrison, this appears to be a malicious report. However, I still need to complete my assessment. May I speak with Emma privately? 20 minutes later, Janet emerged from Emma's room looking grim. Your daughter is clearly ill, clearly being appropriately cared for, and clearly loves and trusts you. She also told me about what her mean grandpa said at the family party. She handed me her card. I'm closing this case as unfounded, but I'm also filing a report about the false allegations. This kind of weaponizing of CPS is taken very seriously. As soon as Janet left, I called my supervisor at work. Lisa, I need to take emergency leave. Family crisis. The same family crisis that has Robert Morrison calling our agency asking about your employment status and whether you've ever been disciplined for misconduct? My blood turned to ice. He called my job? An hour ago. Wanted to know if we'd received any complaints about your professional conduct, if you'd ever been investigated for ethics violations. Sarah, what the hell is going on? I sank into a chair, the full scope of Robert's campaign finally hitting me. He wasn't just attacking my reputation, he was systematically targeting every pillar of stability in my life. My credibility as a mother, my professional standing, my marriage to David. He's trying to destroy me, I whispered. Well, he picked the wrong person, Lisa said firmly. I've already documented his call as harassment. And Sarah? Whatever you're planning to do about this, you have my full support. My phone buzzed with another text from Robert. *, how did your visit go? This is what happens when you threaten me. Withdraw your accusations, or tomorrow I call your mortgage company about that insurance fraud investigation. *. Insurance fraud investigation? What was he talking about? Then I remembered, last year, when Emma was first diagnosed, there had been a paperwork mix-up with our insurance. Claims had been submitted incorrectly, then resubmitted. We'd spent months sorting it out with mountains of documentation proving everything was legitimate. But in the wrong hands, presented the right way, those resubmissions could be made to look suspicious. Robert wasn't just playing dirty. He was playing chess, and he was better at this game than I'd given him credit for. My phone rang again. David. Sarah, what the hell is happening? Robert just called me crying, saying CPS showed up at our house? That you're having him investigated at work? The manipulation in Robert's version was masterful, painting himself as the victim while leaving out the part where he'd sick child services on us. David, I need you to come home. Now. We need to talk, and we need to do it before Robert's next move. Because there would be a next move. And I was starting to realize I might be in over my head. David walked through our front door 3 hours later looking like he'd aged a decade. His hair was disheveled, his clothes wrinkled from sleeping in them, and there were dark circles under his eyes that hadn't been there yesterday. Mom's crying, he said without preamble. She keeps saying the family is being torn apart and it's all her fault for not controlling Robert better. I felt a stab of guilt. Margaret had always been kind to me, caught in the middle of her husband's toxicity. But I couldn't let sympathy derail me now. David, sit down. There's more you need to know. I walked him through everything, Robert's calls to the hospital, my job, the insurance fraud threats. With each revelation, David's face grew paler. He called Dr. Peterson directly? David's voice was barely a whisper. Trying to plant doubt about Emma's diagnosis. And that's not even the worst part. I showed him Robert's texts. He's threatening to go after our mortgage next. David, he's not going to stop until we're homeless, jobless, and Emma's been taken away. David buried his face in his hands. This is insane. This isn't the man who raised me. Isn't it though? I sat down beside him. You've told me stories, David. The way he'd pit foster kids against each other. How he'd threaten to send them back if they didn't follow his rules. The loyalty tests he'd put you through. That was different. We were troubled kids who needed structure. You were children who needed love. I took his hands, forcing him to look at me. And now he's using those same tactics on our family. The threats, the manipulation, turning people against each other. This is who he's always been. Emma's voice drifted down from upstairs. She was playing with her dolls, making them have a tea party. The normalcy of it felt surreal against the backdrop of our crumbling world. I can't choose between my father and my family, David said finally. Don't make me do that. He already made that choice for you when he attacked Emma. I pulled up my laptop. Look, I've been thinking about this all morning. If I come forward now, it looks reactive. Like I'm just retaliating because of what happened at dinner. David looked hopeful for the first time since he'd walked in. So you're going to let it go? No. I'm going to be smarter about it. I opened a new browser window. I need to build an airtight case. Get other foster families to come forward. Document everything properly. Make it impossible for him to claim this is just a vindictive daughter-in-law with an agenda. My phone rang. Sarah, David's sister. Sarah, you need to know something. Her voice was tight with anger. I just got off the phone with the Hendersons, you remember, they used to foster through Robert's agency? Someone called them this morning asking about your history of making false accusations. Wanted to know if you'd ever tried to cause trouble for Robert before. My blood went cold. What did they tell them? The truth, that you've never said a word against Robert until yesterday. But Sarah, whoever called knew details about Emma's treatment schedule. They knew about her appointment next Tuesday. David and I looked at each other. That information wasn't public. Someone with access to our family calendar, our conversations, our private information was feeding Robert intelligence. Who else has access to Emma's medical information? I asked David. Just us, your mom, and... His face went ashen. Oh God. Margaret. She has emergency contact privileges at the hospital. She's been helping coordinate appointments when we couldn't get time off work. The betrayal hit like a physical blow. Sweet, gentle Margaret, Emma's beloved grandma Maggie who read her stories and brought her special smoothies, was being used as a spy. She doesn't know, David said quickly, reading my expression. Robert's probably just looking through her purse, her phone. She tells him everything because she thinks they're being supportive grandparents. A new text came through, but this time it wasn't from Robert. It was from a number I didn't recognize. Asterisk Mrs. Harrison, my name is Amanda Chin. I saw what happened on Margaret's Facebook post about the family dinner. I was a foster child in Robert's care from 2018 to 2020. We need to talk. I'm not the only one. Asterisk. I showed David the message, watching hope and dread war across his features. If I do this, I said quietly, if I really go through with exposing him, there's no going back. Your relationship with him, with some of your family, it'll be over forever. David looked up toward Emma's room, where we could still hear her innocent chatter. He made that choice when he called our little girl a liar, he said finally. Do it. I typed back to Amanda, when can we meet? Her response came immediately, tonight. And I'm bringing friends. That evening, I sat in a coffee shop downtown feeling like I was about to cross a line I could never uncross. David had stayed home with Emma, and I told him I was meeting with someone who might have information about Robert's foster care practices. I hadn't mentioned that 3 other people were coming too. Amanda Chen was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 20s, with tired eyes that reminded me too much of the kids I worked with. She slid into the booth across from me, followed by 2 others, a lanky boy who couldn't be older than 19 and a girl with purple hair who kept looking over her shoulder. I'm Marcus, the boy said, extending his hand. I was with the Morrisons for 8 months when I was 16. Jess, the purple-haired girl added quietly. 2 years, ages 14 to 16. Amanda pulled out her phone and placed it on the table. Do you mind if I record this? We've learned it's better to have everything documented. The way she said we've learned sent chills down my spine. This wasn't their first rodeo. How many of you are there? I asked. 7 that we know of, Amanda said. Maybe more. Robert was very good at isolating us from each other, making us feel like whatever happened was our fault. It took years before we started connecting online. Marcus leaned forward. What he said about your daughter, that's textbook Robert. He finds your weakest spot and hammers it until you break. What do you mean? I had a learning disability, Marcus explained. Dyslexia, ADHD. Robert used to tell my caseworkers I was faking it to get out of chores. Said I was manipulating the system for attention. Sound familiar? My stomach twisted. But you were just a kid. So is your daughter, Jess said pointedly. Age doesn't matter to him. If you're vulnerable, you're a target. Amanda slid a manila folder across the table. These are copies of documents we've been collecting. Financial records, incident reports that were never filed, witness statements from neighbors who saw things they shouldn't have. I opened the folder and felt my breath catch. Bank statements showing massive deposits that coincided with new placements. Photos of expensive purchases. Most damning of all, a handwritten note in Robert's writing, JM acting out again, time to remind him how easy it is to find a new placement. Kid needs to remember who holds the cards. JM? I asked. Jeremy Martinez, Amanda said sadly. He was 12 when Robert took him. Lasted 3 weeks before he begged to be moved. Robert had convinced his caseworker that Jeremy was unplaceable and manipulative. The kid ended up in a group home. Where's Jeremy now? The 3 exchanged looks. Prison, Marcus said quietly. Armed robbery last year. He's been in and out of the system since he left Robert's place. Never really recovered. I thought about Emma's confused face when Robert called her a faker, and rage bubbled up in my chest. Why haven't you come forward before? Who's going to believe us? Jess's laugh was bitter. We're aged-out foster kids with records. Drug possession, truancy, assault charges. Robert made sure we all left his house looking like problems. But you weren't problems when you arrived? Honor roll student, Amanda said, pointing to herself. Eagle Scout, Marcus added. Volunteer at the animal shelter, Jess finished. We were good kids who just needed stability. Instead, we got Robert. My phone buzzed with a text from David, Emma's asking when you'll be home. She wants you to read her bedtime story. Asterisk. The normalcy of that request, my healthy, loved daughter wanting her mommy, felt obscene after what I'd just learned. I need to ask you something, I said carefully. If I move forward with this, if I file reports and contact investigators, are you willing to go on record? Because Robert's already proven he'll fight dirty. Amanda looked at the others, some silent communication passing between them. Mrs. Harrison, she said finally, we've been waiting years for someone with credibility to take him on. Someone he can't dismiss or discredit easily. When we saw what happened to your daughter. She shook her head. We can't let him do to other kids what he did to us. But you need to know, Marcus added grimly, he's going to come after you harder than you can imagine. And he's got allies in the system who owe him favors. As if summoned by his words, my phone rang. The caller ID made my blood run cold, Child Protective Services emergency line. Mrs. Harrison? This is Janet Mills. I need you to come down to the office immediately. We've received additional reports about your daughter, and there's been a complication with her medical records. The words complication with her medical records echoed in my head as I drove through the empty streets toward the CPS office. I'd left the coffee shop in a panic, promising Amanda and the others I'd call them tomorrow, but now everything felt like it was spiraling out of control. Janet Mills was waiting for me in the lobby, her professional mask firmly in place, but I could see the tension around her eyes. Mrs. Harrison, thank you for coming so quickly. She led me down a familiar hallway. I'd walked these same corridors countless times as a social worker, but never as the subject of an investigation. We need to discuss some inconsistencies that have come to light. My mouth went dry. What kind of inconsistencies? Someone provided us with what they claim are duplicate insurance claims for Emma's treatment. They're alleging that you've been billing for procedures that never happened, or billing multiple times for the same services. Janet's voice was carefully neutral, but I could hear the apology underneath. We entered a small conference room where another man was waiting, tall, gray-haired, with the kind of authoritative presence that screamed federal investigator. Mrs. Harrison, I'm Agent Morrison with the State Insurance Fraud Division. The name hit me like a slap. Morrison? As in? Robert Morrison is my uncle, he said, not bothering to hide his distaste. And before you ask, yes, this creates a conflict of interest that I've already disclosed to my supervisors. I'm here precisely because of that conflict, to make sure this investigation is conducted fairly. I sank into the offered chair, my mind racing. Robert's nephew. Of course he had family in law enforcement, he'd probably been planning this move for months. Agent Morrison, Janet began, can you explain what prompted this investigation? He slid a folder across the table. We received an anonymous tip about potential fraud in your daughter's case, along with copies of what appeared to be duplicate billing records. When we cross-referenced with the insurance company, we found some irregularities that warrant investigation. I opened the folder with trembling hands. The documents looked official, professional, and completely damning. They showed Emma's treatments, but with subtle alterations. Dates changed by a day or two. Procedure codes modified. Dollar amounts inflated. These aren't real, I whispered. Someone doctored these. That's what we need to determine, Agent Morrison said. Mrs. Harrison, I want you to know that despite my family connection, I'm going to investigate this thoroughly and fairly. If these documents are fraudulent, we'll find out who created them. And if they're not? Janet asked. Then Mrs. Harrison could be facing serious federal charges. My phone buzzed with a text from Robert, * having a nice evening? This is what happens when you threaten family. Drop your accusations, or things get much worse. *. I showed the message to both investigators. Agent Morrison's jaw tightened as he read it. Mrs. Harrison, I need you to understand something. My uncle may have raised me, but I became a law enforcement officer to stop people who abuse positions of power. He leaned forward. If he's fabricating evidence to frame you, I will personally ensure he faces the full consequences. But the investigation continues in the meantime? I asked. Yes. And unfortunately, given the serious nature of insurance fraud allegations, I have to recommend that Emma's care be temporarily overseen by a neutral third party. Someone to ensure no further irregularities occur while we sort this out. My heart stopped. You're taking her away from me? Not removing her from your custody, Janet clarified quickly. But all medical decisions would need to be approved by a court-appointed advocate until this is resolved. I thought about Emma at home, probably wondering why Mommy wasn't there to read her bedtime story. Tomorrow she had a crucial appointment with her oncologist, a treatment that couldn't be delayed. How long? I managed to ask. Could be weeks, Agent Morrison admitted. These investigations take time, especially when we're dealing with sophisticated document forgery. As I walked back to my car, my phone rang again. This time it was Amanda. Mrs. Harrison, we saw the news. What news? It's on the local station's website. Local mother under investigation for insurance fraud. They're not naming you, but... She paused. We know Robert has connections at the news station too. His golf buddy is a producer there. I sat in my car in the parking garage, feeling walls closing in from every direction. Robert wasn't just attacking me, he was systematically destroying every aspect of my life while positioning himself as a concerned family member just trying to protect a vulnerable child. Amanda, I said finally, how fast can you and the others get your documentation together? Because I think we're past the point of building a careful case. What do you need? Everything. Bank records, witness statements, anything that proves Robert's been running a scam. Because if I'm going down for fraud, I'm taking him with me. We can have it ready by tomorrow morning. I started my car, my hands surprisingly steady for someone whose world was crumbling. Good. Because tomorrow, we go nuclear. When I got home, David was pacing in the kitchen like a caged animal, his phone pressed to his ear. Emma's bedroom light was still on upstairs, and I could hear her coughing, the kind of deep, rattling cough that meant her immune system was struggling. No, Mom, you don't understand, David was saying into the phone. Sarah didn't do anything wrong. Robert is manipulating. He looked up when I walked in, his face crumbling with relief and terror. She's home, I have to go. He hung up and immediately pulled me into his arms. How bad is it? I told him everything, the forged documents, the federal investigation, the court-appointed advocate who would now oversee Emma's medical care. With each detail, I watched my husband's face cycle through disbelief, rage, and something that looked like defeat. He's going to win, isn't he? David whispered. He's actually going to destroy us. Before I could answer, Emma appeared in the doorway, clutching her elephant and looking smaller than ever in her oversized pajamas. Mommy, I don't feel good. My tummy hurts and I'm really tired. I knelt down to feel her forehead, she was running a fever. Baby, when did this start? After dinner. I threw up a little bit. She leaned against me, and I could feel how warm she was even through her pajamas. David was already grabbing our emergency hospital bag. We'd learned to keep it packed at all times. Emma's compromised immune system meant any fever could turn dangerous quickly. Wait, I said, the reality hitting me. I can't make medical decisions anymore. We have to call the court advocate first. Are you insane? David's voice was sharp with panic. Our daughter has a fever and you want to wait for some bureaucrat to give us permission to take her to the hospital? If we don't follow protocol, they could use it as evidence that we're unfit parents. I was already dialing the emergency number Janet had given me. I hate this as much as you do, but we can't give them any ammunition. The phone rang 6 times before a groggy voice answered. This is Dr. Patricia Wells, court-appointed medical advocate for Emma Harrison. I explained the situation while Emma swayed on her feet and David looked ready to throw something. Dr. Wells asked a series of questions about Emma's symptoms, then finally gave us permission to proceed to the emergency room. However, she added, I'll need to meet you there to oversee the treatment decisions. The drive to the hospital felt endless. Emma dozed fitfully in her car seat while David white-knuckled the steering wheel, muttering curses under his breath that I pretended not to hear. This is exactly what he wanted, David said as we pulled into the hospital parking lot. Emma's sick, us scrambling, jumping through hoops while she suffers. Dr. Wells was already waiting in the ER lobby, a stern-looking woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses. She introduced herself curtly, then followed us back to the triage area where Emma's regular nurses greeted us with confused looks. Who's this? Asked Maria, our favorite night nurse, eyeing Dr. Wells suspiciously. Court-appointed medical advocate, I explained, hating how the words tasted. She has to approve Emma's treatment plan. Maria's expression darkened, but she remained professional as she took Emma's vitals. Temperature 102.3, elevated heart rate, low blood pressure, all the warning signs we'd learned to fear. Dr. Peterson arrived 20 minutes later, took one look at the situation, and pulled me aside. Sarah, what the hell is going on? I have some stranger questioning my treatment recommendations for Emma, and the front desk said there's something about a fraud investigation? Robert Morrison happened, I said simply. Dr. Peterson's face went through several expressions before settling on cold fury. That son of a bitch is interfering with my patient's care for what, revenge? Apparently. I watched through the room's window as Dr. Wells questioned David about Emma's medication schedule, taking notes like she was building a case rather than helping a sick child. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Asterisk, enjoying your evening? Wait until the morning news cycle. Sleep tight. Asterisk. The morning news was worse than I'd imagined. Local mother accused of exploiting sick child for profit, read the headline scrolling across the bottom of Channel 7's morning show. They didn't use my name, but they didn't need to. Robert had made sure enough details were included that anyone who knew us would connect the dots immediately. My phone had been ringing nonstop since 6 a.m. Reporters, concerned friends, and worst of all, parents from Emma's school wanting to know if the cancer scam story was about us. I'd finally turned it off and hidden it in a drawer, but David's was still buzzing every few minutes. Emma was home from the hospital with antibiotics and strict instructions to rest, but she kept asking why people were calling and why Daddy looked so angry. We'd managed to avoid explaining the news coverage, but I could see the stress affecting her recovery. Mrs. Harrison? Dr. Wells appeared in my living room doorway, consulting her clipboard with the enthusiasm of someone auditing a tax return. I need to observe Emma's medication administration and document her current condition. This was our new reality. 3 times a day, this woman showed up to watch me give my own daughter her prescribed medications, taking notes on everything from dosage timing to Emma's reaction. It felt like being on trial in my own home. She's napping right now, I said, trying to keep the exhaustion out of my voice. Her fever broke around 4 a.m., but she's still weak. I'll need to verify that myself. Dr. Wells headed upstairs without waiting for permission, and I had to bite my tongue to keep from screaming. David emerged from his home office looking haggard. That was my supervisor. Someone called the construction company asking if I had access to the building where Emma receives treatment. Wanted to know if I could have tampered with equipment or records. They're going after your job now too? Trying to. Mike's not buying it, but corporate is getting nervous about the publicity. He slumped onto the couch beside me. Sarah, I've been thinking about this all night. Maybe we should consider Robert's terms. I stared at him. You mean give up? Let him win? I mean protect what's left of our family. His voice cracked. Look around us. Emma's getting sicker from the stress, you're under federal investigation, my job is in jeopardy, and we can't even give our daughter medicine without supervision. How much more can we lose? Before I could answer, my laptop chimed with an email from Amanda Chen, asterisk emergency. Check the news. Channel 12. Asterisk. I pulled up the station's website and felt my blood turn to ice. The headline read, Former Foster Children Allege Abuse Cover-Up, and there was Amanda's photo right next to it, but not as a victim speaking out. The story painted her as a troubled young woman with a history of false accusations, claiming she'd made similar allegations against previous foster families. David, look at this. I turned the screen toward him. They're destroying Amanda's credibility before she can even tell her story. My phone buzzed with a call from a blocked number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Sarah. Robert's voice was calm, almost grandfatherly. I think it's time we talked privately. I have nothing to say to you. Oh, I think you do. You see, tomorrow morning, Channel 12 is running a follow-up story about the pattern of false accusations surrounding foster families in our county. Seems there's a whole network of troubled former foster kids making up stories for attention and money. My stomach dropped. You bastard. Now. Such language. His tone remained pleasant, but there was steel underneath. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to call a press conference for this afternoon. You're going to apologize publicly for the stress you've caused our family during Emma's difficult time. You're going to admit that grief and medical bills made you lash out inappropriately at people trying to help. And if I don't? Tomorrow's story includes some very interesting financial records showing payments from a certain advocacy group to Miss Chen and her friends. Funny how people can be bought these days, isn't it? The line went dead, leaving me staring at the phone in disbelief. Dr. Wells came back downstairs, making notes. Emma appears to be responding well to the antibiotics, but I'm concerned about her emotional state. She seems withdrawn, anxious. Perhaps a psychological evaluation would be beneficial. The threat was clear, one more step toward questioning my fitness as a parent. David was reading over my shoulder, his face growing paler with each word of Robert's fabricated story about Amanda. He's not just destroying us, I whispered. He's destroying everyone who tries to help us. That's when I realized Robert's true genius. He wasn't just attacking me, he was systematically eliminating every potential ally, every piece of evidence, every avenue of support until we had nowhere left to turn except surrender. But he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated how far a mother would go to protect her child. I sat in my car outside the law offices of Peterson, Martinez and Associates, staring at the business card Amanda had slipped me during our coffee shop meeting. If things get really bad, she'd whispered, asterisk call this number. Tell them Amanda sent you. Asterisk. Things had officially gotten really bad. The lawyer who greeted me in the lobby was nothing like I'd expected. Maria Santos was probably my age, wearing a simple black suit and practical flats, with a kind of direct gaze that suggested she'd seen every dirty trick in the book. Amanda told me you might be calling, she said, leading me to her office. She also told me about Robert Morrison. We've been building a case against him for 2 years. My heart nearly stopped. 2 years? Pro bono work for former foster children. Your situation just gave us the missing piece we needed, someone with professional credibility and no criminal record that he could exploit. She pulled out a thick file. Mrs. Harrison, what I'm about to show you goes far beyond financial fraud. The documents she spread across her desk made my stomach turn. Medical records showing injuries to foster children that were never properly reported. Emergency room visits explained away as accidents or behavioral incidents. A pattern of vulnerable kids being placed with Robert specifically because they had nowhere else to go. Jeremy Martinez, the boy Amanda mentioned who's now in prison? He was hospitalized twice during his 3 weeks with Robert. Once for a fall down the stairs, once for food poisoning that looked suspiciously like malnutrition. Why hasn't anyone stopped him? Same reason you're sitting here instead of Emma being in protective custody, Maria said grimly. Robert's very good at making his victims look unreliable while positioning himself as the concerned authority figure. But attacking your daughter was a tactical error. My phone rang, David, calling from work. Sarah, you need to get home. Now. Dr. Wells showed up with 2 other people, and they're asking Emma questions about our family dynamics. I'm on my way. I looked at Maria desperately. How long until you can file your case? We already have. This morning. Federal charges for wire fraud, child endangerment, and conspiracy. She handed me another business card. But Mrs. Harrison, you need to know, Robert's going to escalate before we can stop him. Cornered animals are dangerous. The drive home took forever. When I finally pulled into our driveway, I saw Dr. Wells' car plus a white sedan I didn't recognize. Through our living room window, I could see Emma sitting on the couch between 2 strangers while David paced nearby. I burst through the front door to find my 6-year-old daughter being questioned by a child psychologist and another CPS worker. Mommy. Emma jumped up and ran to me, clinging to my legs with the desperation of a drowning person. Mrs. Harrison, Dr. Wells said coolly, we're conducting a psychological evaluation of Emma to assess her emotional well-being in the current home environment. Without notifying me? Without my consent? The court order gives us broad discretionary powers, the psychologist explained. She was a thin woman with kind eyes who looked deeply uncomfortable with the situation. However, I have to say, Emma appears to be a well-adjusted child who clearly loves and trusts both parents. Dr. Wells frowned at this assessment. But surely the stress of the current situation. The stress appears to be coming from external sources, not the family dynamic, the psychologist interrupted firmly. Dr. Wells, I'm not seeing any evidence that warrants further psychological intervention. My phone buzzed with a text from Maria Santos. Asterisk federal agents are executing search warrants on Robert's properties right now. Brace yourself, he's about to know his world is ending. Asterisk. Before I could process this fully, another text came in from Robert. Asterisk, you stupid bitch. You have no idea what you've unleashed. If I'm going down, I'm taking everyone with me. Asterisk. David read the message over my shoulder, and I watched his face go white. Sarah, he's not stable. When Robert gets cornered, he doesn't think straight. As if summoned by his words, the sound of screeching tires filled our quiet neighborhood. Through the window, I saw Robert's black pickup truck slam to a stop in front of our house. He sat behind the wheel for a moment, and even from a distance, I could see his hands shaking on the steering wheel. Everyone stay calm, I said quietly, but my voice betrayed my terror. Robert climbed out of his truck, moving with the jerky, unpredictable motions of someone operating on pure rage. He walked straight to our front door and began pounding on it with both fists. Sarah, get out here. You want to destroy my family? Let's finish this. The 3 CPS workers exchanged alarmed looks. Emma started crying, pressing her face against my shoulder. Call 911, David told the psychologist, who was already reaching for her phone. But Robert wasn't waiting. The sound of shattering glass from our kitchen told us he'd found another way in. The sound of Robert's footsteps on our kitchen tile sent ice through my veins. Emma's small hands fisted in my shirt as David moved to position himself between us and the kitchen doorway. The 3 CPS workers huddled together near the stairs, the psychologist speaking in urgent, hushed tones to the 911 dispatcher. Sarah. Robert's voice boomed through the house, closer now. You think you're so smart? You think your little investigation is going to save you? I heard him rifling through our kitchen drawers, the sound of silverware clattering to the floor. My mind raced through what he might be looking for, what he might do with whatever he found. Mrs. Harrison, Dr. Wells whispered, her earlier authority completely evaporated. Is there a back exit? Before I could answer, Robert appeared in our living room doorway. His clothes were disheveled, his gray hair wild, and his eyes had the unfocused look of someone who'd lost touch with reality. In his right hand, he clutched a stack of papers. You want evidence of fraud? He snarled, waving the documents. Here's your evidence. Bank records showing payments to you from my business account. Forged medical bills with your signature. Photographs of you meeting with known criminals. My stomach dropped. Even in his breakdown, Robert was still playing chess. Those papers, whatever they contained, would be his final insurance policy. David stepped forward, hands raised peacefully. Robert, whatever's in those papers, we can work this out. Just calm down. Calm down? Robert's laugh was bitter and broken. They raided my house this morning, David. Froze my bank accounts. Suspended my foster license. 20 years of work destroyed because your wife couldn't mind her own business. Emma whimpered against my shoulder, and the sound seemed to refocus Robert's attention on us. His expression shifted, becoming calculating again despite his obvious breakdown. You know what's funny, Sarah? All this time you've been so worried about protecting Emma from me, when you should have been protecting her from yourself. What do you mean? I managed to ask. Robert smiled, and it was the most terrifying thing I'd ever seen. That medication error last month? When Emma's dosage was wrong and she had that allergic reaction? I made sure the hospital has security footage of you switching out her 4-bag. My blood turned to ice. There had been a medication error. Emma had suffered a severe allergic reaction that landed her in intensive care for 2 days. But I hadn't switched anything. I'd been in the bathroom when the nurse changed her 4. You doctored the footage, David said, his voice deadly quiet. Prove it. Robert's grin widened. Try explaining to a jury why a mother would deliberately give her child the wrong medication. Try explaining why you needed the insurance money so badly that you were willing to risk your daughter's life. The psychologist gasped audibly. Dr. Wells was frantically scribbling notes, her entire demeanor suggesting she was witnessing a confession rather than fabricated threats. That's enough, I said, standing up carefully with Emma still in my arms. Emma, sweetheart, I need you to go upstairs with a nice lady while Mommy and Daddy talk to Grandpa Robert. But Emma's grip on me tightened. No, Mommy. He's scary. He's going to hurt us. Out of the mouths of babes. Even at 6 years old, Emma could see what the adults in the room were struggling to process. Robert had moved beyond manipulation into genuine danger. Nobody's going anywhere, Robert said, stepping further into the room. We're going to sit here and wait for the police to arrive. And when they do, I'm going to tell them exactly what kind of mother Sarah really is. My phone buzzed with an incoming call. Maria Santos. Without breaking eye contact with Robert, I answered and put it on speaker. Sarah, don't say anything. Federal agents are en route to your location. Robert's business partner just confessed to everything in exchange for immunity. The evidence fabrication, the document forgery, all of it. Robert's face went ashen, but his grip on the papers tightened. They also found the original security footage from the hospital, Maria continued. The real footage. Showing Robert entering Emma's room while you were in the bathroom. The room went completely silent except for Emma's quiet sniffling and the distant sound of sirens. The silence stretched for an eternity before Robert's face twisted into something unrecognizable. The papers in his hands crumpled as his fists clenched, and I watched 20 years of carefully constructed lies collapse behind his eyes. You don't understand, he said, his voice suddenly small and desperate. I never hurt her. I was trying to protect her from you. Protect her? David's voice was incredulous. You poisoned our daughter. I switched the medication to saline. Robert's confession burst out like a dam breaking. Just saline. I knew she'd have a reaction to the prescribed dose. I read her chart. I was trying to save her from your Munchausen syndrome. The accusation hung in the air like poison gas. Even in his breakdown, Robert was still trying to flip the script, still trying to make himself the hero and me the villain. Dr. Wells stopped writing, her pen hovering over her notepad as she processed what she'd just heard. The other CPS worker had gone pale, clearly realizing she'd walked into something far beyond a simple family dispute. You're saying you deliberately tampered with a cancer patient's medication, the psychologist said slowly, to protect her from her mother's supposed mental illness? She doesn't have cancer. Robert exploded, spittle flying from his lips. Look at her. Does she look like a dying child to you? All eyes turned to Emma, who was trembling in my arms, her bald head covered by a soft pink cap, dark circles under her eyes, her tiny frame lost in clothes that had fit her before chemotherapy stole 20 pounds from her 6-year-old body. She lost her hair from stress, Robert continued, his delusion spiraling deeper. Sarah's been poisoning her slowly, making her sick, shaving her head. Classic Munchausen by proxy. I have documentation. You have fabricated evidence, David cut him off. Just like everything else. The sirens were getting closer now, maybe 2 blocks away. Robert's head snapped toward the sound, and I saw panic replace rage in his expression. They don't understand, he muttered, pacing now like a caged animal. 20 years I've been saving children from families like this. 20 years I've been the only one willing to see the truth. My phone rang again, this time it was Agent Morrison, Robert's nephew. Mrs. Harrison, we're 1 minute out. Is everyone safe? For now, I said, watching Robert deteriorate in real time. We found everything, Agent Morrison continued, his voice tight with disgust. The fake bank accounts in your name. The doctored medical records. The bribes to hospital staff. And Sarah? His voice softened slightly. We found Emma's real medical files. The ones he stole and altered. Your daughter's case is textbook acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Every test, every scan, every treatment has been medically necessary and appropriate. Robert must have heard enough of the conversation because he suddenly lunged toward us. David caught him by the shoulders, and the 2 men struggled for a moment before Robert broke free, backing toward our sliding glass door that led to the backyard. You'll never prove any of this, he panted. I've been covering my tracks for 20 years. You think some social worker and her sick kid are going to bring me down? That's when Emma spoke up, her voice small but clear in the chaos. Why do you keep saying I'm not really sick? The doctors showed me pictures of my bad blood. I've seen them. The simple honesty of her words cut through Robert's delusions like a knife. For just a moment, his mask slipped completely, and I saw something that might have been shame flicker across his features. But then the front door burst open, and federal agents flooded our living room, weapons drawn, shouting commands. Robert's eyes went wild as he realized his escape routes were cut off. This isn't over, he snarled, looking directly at me. Even if you win today, I'll always be in your head. Every time Emma gets sick, every time she has a setback, you'll wonder if I was right. The agents moved to surround him, but Robert held up his hands, surrendering with the calculated timing of someone making a final play. The handcuffs clicked around Robert's wrists with a finality that should have felt satisfying, but instead left me hollow. Emma was still clinging to me, her small body shaking as the federal agents led Robert through our front door. The last thing he did was turn back to look at us, his eyes promising that even from prison, this wasn't finished. Mommy, Emma whispered against my neck, is the scary man going to come back? Before I could answer, Dr. Wells cleared her throat pointedly. Mrs. Harrison, while these developments are certainly illuminating, my court-appointed responsibilities haven't changed. I still need to complete my assessment. I stared at her in disbelief. You just watched a man confess to tampering with my daughter's medication, and you're worried about paperwork? I watched a clearly unstable individual make wild accusations, she corrected coldly. Until the court officially rules on his claims, I have to treat them as potentially credible. David stepped between us, his patience finally snapping. Get out of my house. Now. I have legal authority. You have authority over medical decisions, not over traumatizing my daughter further. His voice carried an edge I'd rarely heard before. Emma needs rest, quiet, and normal family time. Not more interrogation. Agent Morrison appeared in our doorway, having finished processing Robert's arrest. Mrs. Harrison, Dr. Wells, we need to discuss the evidence we've recovered. He set a tablet on our coffee table, showing what appeared to be a sophisticated computer setup. We found this in Robert's home office. He's been creating deepfake videos and doctored security footage for months. The hospital footage showing you allegedly tampering with Emma's for? Completely fabricated. Dr. Wells leaned forward to examine the tablet, her professional mask finally showing cracks. This level of technology, he could have faked anything. Including financial records, medical documents, even recorded phone calls, Agent Morrison confirmed. Mrs. Harrison, I owe you an apology. The evidence against you is so convincing because Robert's been planning this character assassination for over a year. My phone buzzed with a call from Dr. Peterson. Sarah, thank God you're okay. I just got word from hospital administration. They're launching a full internal investigation into how Robert gained access to Emma's medical information. Someone on our staff was feeding him confidential data. The betrayal hit fresh. Not only had Robert been attacking us, but he'd had help from inside the very medical system we trusted with Emma's life. Who? I asked, dreading the answer. Sandra in medical records. She's been taking payments from Robert for 18 months, giving him access to files for multiple patients. Emma wasn't his only target. Emma stirred in my arms, and I realized she'd been listening to everything. Mommy, does this mean I can have my regular doctors back? I don't like the mean lady with a clipboard. Dr. Wells stiffened at being called the mean lady, but before she could respond, Agent Morrison's phone rang. Morrison, what? Are you certain? Jesus Christ. He hung up and looked directly at Dr. Wells. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with me for questioning. We just discovered that Robert made several payments to a consulting firm that employs you. The color drained from Dr. Wells' face. I don't know what you're talking about. Psychological Services Consulting, LLC. You received $5,000 last week, the day before you were assigned to Emma's case. Agent Morrison stepped closer. Want to explain how that's a coincidence? As federal agents escorted Dr. Wells out of our house, I finally understood the true scope of Robert's conspiracy. He hadn't just been attacking us, he'd been systematically corrupting every system designed to protect children, turning helpers into weapons, caregivers into conspirators. David sank onto the couch beside me, looking exhausted. How many other families has he done this to? Before anyone could answer, my laptop chimed with an urgent email. The sender made my blood run cold, Robert's lawyer. The message contained a single line: my client's arrest doesn't invalidate the evidence he's compiled. Expect civil litigation within 48 hours. Even behind bars, Robert was still fighting. 2 days after Robert's arrest, I thought we were finally safe. Emma's court-appointed advocate had been removed, the federal charges were moving forward, and Dr. Peterson had cleared Emma to resume her normal treatment schedule. For the first time in weeks, I'd slept through the night. Then the process server showed up at 7 a.m. Sarah Harrison? You're being served with a civil lawsuit for defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and conspiracy to file false criminal charges. I stared at the legal documents, my coffee growing cold in my hands. Robert might be in federal custody, but his lawyer was making good on that threat. The lawsuit sought $2 million in damages and painted me as a vindictive woman who'd orchestrated an elaborate frame job against an innocent foster care provider. What's that, Mommy? Emma asked, appearing in the kitchen doorway in her pajamas. Just boring grown-up papers, sweetheart. I forced a smile, but inside I was screaming. We'd used every penny of our savings on Emma's medical bills. A $2 million judgment would destroy us financially, even if we eventually won. My phone rang, Maria Santos, calling earlier than usual. Sarah, we have a problem. 3 more former foster children have come forward, but they're not supporting our case. They're claiming Amanda and the others coerced them into lying about Robert. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? Someone's been paying these kids significant money to recant their original statements. They're now saying Robert was a loving foster father who never hurt anyone. I walked into the living room where David was getting ready for work, listening to the local news. The anchor's voice made my blood freeze. In a shocking development, multiple witnesses in the Morrison foster care abuse case have admitted to fabricating their allegations. Channel 12 has learned that these former foster children may have been part of an elaborate extortion scheme. Turn it off, I whispered, but David was transfixed. The news segment showed Amanda Chen in handcuffs, being led into a police station. The reporter's voice continued, Ms. Chen and 2 accomplices have been arrested for conspiracy to commit fraud and extortion. According to police, they attempted to blackmail prominent foster care provider Robert Morrison with false abuse allegations. This can't be happening, David said, his face ashen. But it was happening. Within an hour, my phone was buzzing with calls from reporters wanting my comment on the conspiracy to frame an innocent man. Emma's school called to say several parents were concerned about having their children around us. Even my own mother called, her voice uncertain for the first time in my life. Sarah, honey, I saw the news. You know I love you, but are you sure about all this? The doubt in her voice shattered something inside me. If my own mother was questioning my story, how could I expect strangers on a jury to believe me? Maria Santos arrived at my house within 2 hours, looking grim. Sarah, we need to talk about a plea arrangement. A plea arrangement? For what? Robert's legal team is offering to drop the civil lawsuit if you publicly admit to orchestrating false charges against him. They're also demanding Amanda and the others receive immunity in exchange for testimony against you. I sank into a chair, the full horror of the situation hitting me. He's going to win, isn't he? Even from prison, he's going to destroy us. There's something else, Maria said quietly. The federal prosecutor called this morning. With the witnesses recanting and Amanda arrested, they're considering dropping the charges against Robert entirely. Emma appeared in the doorway again, having overheard more than I'd hoped. Mommy, why do people keep saying bad things about you on TV? As I looked at my daughter, bald, pale, but alive and fighting, I realized Robert's final masterstroke. He turned our greatest strength into our greatest weakness. The very people we tried to save were now being used to destroy us. And the worst part? I was starting to wonder if we should take a plea. The breaking point came when Emma collapsed during her next chemotherapy session. I was sitting beside her hospital bed, watching her sleep off the treatment, when Dr. Peterson burst in with a tablet in his hands. Sarah, you need to see this. Now. The screen showed a recording, grainy security footage from what looked like a parking garage. In it, I watched Robert meeting with a man I didn't recognize, handing over thick envelopes of cash. One of our IT specialists has been going through Robert's confiscated equipment, Dr. Peterson explained. This was hidden in an encrypted folder labeled insurance. Look at the timestamp. The date was from last week, 2 days after the other foster children had recanted their stories. We kept digging, Dr. Peterson continued, swiping to the next video. Here's the same man meeting with Amanda Chen. And here, meeting with the other witnesses who suddenly changed their stories. My heart started racing. You're saying Robert orchestrated their arrests? I'm saying Robert never stopped playing chess, even from his jail cell. His lawyer was the middleman, paying people to destroy the case from the inside. Before I could process this fully, Agent Morrison appeared in the doorway, his face grim but determined. "Mrs. Harrison, we need to talk. My uncle just made a critical mistake." He showed me a recorded phone call from the federal prison. Robert's voice was clear as he spoke to his lawyer. "The Harrison woman is almost broken. Once she takes the plea, we can expand the model to other cases. Those bleeding heart social workers are all the same, threaten their families and they fold like cheap tents. He's been running this scam for years," Agent Morrison continued. "Target families with sick children, manipulate the system to create evidence of abuse or fraud, then force them into silence with bogus lawsuits. Emma wasn't his first victim, she was just the one who finally fought back." The door opened again, and Amanda Chen walked in, but not in handcuffs. She looked tired but resolute, flanked by 2 FBI agents. "The arrest was fake," she explained. "We've been working undercover for 3 weeks, gathering evidence of Robert's bribery scheme. Those payments, the witness intimidation, the fabricated evidence, we have it all on record now." I stared at her in disbelief. "You mean?" "I mean Robert Morrison is finished. Not just the fraud charges, conspiracy, witness tampering, racketeering. He's looking at 20 to life in federal prison." Emma stirred in her hospital bed, her eyes fluttering open. "Mommy? What's happening?" "Everyone sounds happy." I took her small hand in mine, finally able to smile genuinely for the first time in months. "The scary man can't hurt us anymore, baby. It's over." But Emma, in her 6-year-old wisdom, asked the question that mattered most. "Does this mean I can just be sick like a normal sick kid now? Without all the scary stuff?" Dr. Peterson laughed, actually laughed. "Emma, you can be exactly as sick as your leukemia makes you, nothing more and nothing less. And we're going to beat it together." 3 months later, I stood in a federal courthouse watching Robert Morrison get sentenced to 25 years in prison. The judge's words rang through the courtroom. "You have corrupted systems designed to protect the most vulnerable members of our society. Your actions represent the worst kind of betrayal of public trust." Emma wasn't there, she was at home with David, celebrating her latest clean scan results. Her hair was starting to grow back in soft brown curls, and her laugh had returned to its full, infectious volume. As Robert was led away in shackles, he looked at me one last time. But the fear and manipulation were gone from his eyes. There was only defeat. Emma was right. She could finally just be a sick kid getting better, instead of a pawn in someone else's twisted game. And we were finally, truly safe.